Welcome, everyone, to the Daily Bread with Tom Hartman. And here is your financial market news for October 9th, 2025. So we have here Scott Bessent is making a tour. He is on all the news stations talking about the Trump plan. Actually, a lot of stuff going on the Trump space right now. While it's not moving markets, there's the whole thing about the peace deal in Gaza and Israel, and maybe Iran is off the map, off the plans here. It's crazy. Not sure what to believe, not sure if it's going to follow through, but it is pretty interesting. But let's focus on what's actually moving markets. So here, Besant was on Fox News talking about the new potential arrangement with Argentina. This is a post from Laura Ingram who says, helping Argentina isn't charity, it's strategy. Let's hear what Scott Besant has to say.
Explain to our viewers what is going on with Argentina, because the U.S. Treasury today directly purchased Argentine pesos and finalized this $20 billion currency swap framework with Argentina's central bank. So the intent, I guess, is to provide assistance from the Latin American country's economic turmoil. It's clear how Argentina benefits from this deal. What do we get out of it?
We get a lot out of it. Argentina is a beacon in Latin America. President Milei has done the right thing. He is trying to break 100 years of a bad cycle in Argentina. He is also a great ally for the U.S. He'll be coming to the Oval Office next Tuesday, and he is committed to getting China out of Argentina. They're all over the place in Latin America. And when people say to me, how is this not America first? I'll tell you why it's not. Do you want to be shooting at more gunboats like in Venezuela? We do not want a failed state.
So this isn't a bailout?
Sorry, it's not a bailout at all. There's no money being transferred. The ESF has never lost money. It's not going to lose money here. I was in the investment business, mostly currencies, for 40 years. You're supposed to buy low, sell high, and the Argentine peso is undervalued. We're going to have an election in Argentina the 26th of this month. We think President Milei will do quite well. And he is putting the Peronist path behind them. And people in the U.S., especially on the left, they are willing to, Senator Warren tried to put a bill in front of the Senate that the Exchange Stabilization Fund could not bail out Argentina, which I think is rich because she's an American Peronist. Don't cry for me, Massachusetts. And when Joe Biden was in office, what was their idea of foreign aid? It was circumcisions in Malawi and drag shows in Central America. So we are going to use Argentina as an example. We back up our allies, and the Obama administration missed a big opportunity in the 8 years he was in, as many Latin American governments went center-right. So we are seeing Argentina, Paraguay, Ecuador, Bolivia, I think Colombia in the next election. So it is.
This is key for us. China is all over Central America, Latin America, Mexico, South America. It's critical that we maintain really good relations and that these are strong economic.
All right, so that is a big 1-2 punch coming from Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary. He doesn't normally come out and talk about left and right, about politics or anything like that. Not normally. I mean, yeah, he does lambast the Democrats every now and then, but that's just like the turn of phrase. He's part of the administration. You expect that. Here, he talked about the idea that the economic side, where there is the credit swap that's going to be happening, or the currency swap that's going to be happening in order to strengthen the Argentinian peso, and that America is part in doing that. And he's saying that this is not a bailout of that nation. But then in the same breath, he's saying, hey, we can't have a failed nation near our borders on our south. And China is doing a lot going into the Latin countries with their Belt and Road Initiative, are really, going to those places that have economic hardships, paying for infrastructure and owning a bunch of the infrastructure, or having a claim on there. And so just tactically, strategically, it makes sense for the United States, at least from the administration's perspective, in order to shore that up. And they see the weakness in Argentina as a way of cutting into the support that China has in that location. But then he has to sell this idea, right? He has to sell this idea that it's not necessarily an economic war, it's more of a safety thing. But if you frame it in that way, well, then it's not, from my perspective, it's not sensationalistic enough. It doesn't bring the emotions enough. And so he paints the picture of the shooting tugboats off the southern coast. Then he brings in Elizabeth Warren, who obviously is opposing this this financial maneuvering by the ESF, and he's saying, well, where was the left? Where is their aid for underperforming countries? When the left is in power, the left is the administration in power, and he just comes out swinging left, right, left, right, left, right. Now, I don't particularly care about the left-right nature of it. What I care is what the government decides they want to buy or what they're going to sell. And here he's making a very strong claim that they're expecting Milei to win win elections. They're expecting for America to be part of making the currency situation, the economic situation better in Argentina, at least to the degree that they are reliant on the United States as opposed to China. And so it's not for nothing you're seeing some people make a decision, hey, I'm going to be buying the Argentinian peso because, it's going to be like the lira, who knows, where it skyrockets in value as people understand that America is going to be funneling some of their currency strength into that currency. All right, pretty interesting. All right, next up, we have this news that came through. Luxembourg claims bragging rights as first Eurozone nation to invest in Bitcoin. That's right. Luxembourg's Intergenerational Sovereign Wealth Fund, the FSIL, has invested 1% of its holdings in Bitcoin ETFs, making it the first state-level fund in the Eurozone to do so. Interesting. I don't know which ETFs they decided to buy. Don't know how that's going to affect spot directly, but Bitcoiners certainly love this as more proof that the world is moving towards a Bitcoin first currency. Moving on to this interesting post by Arnaud Bertrand, who is not the first to surface this idea, but is talking about it. And that has to do with rare earth controls that China has recently imposed on the world. If we just jump to the original post here from CNYR, China bans exports of technologies and carriers related to rare earth mining, refining, metal smelting, magnet manufacturing, and recycling. Now, we know that China is a big source of rare earth metals. What does it matter? Well, Arnaud Bertrand from X says this is actually big, potentially huge, notably because China's new rare earth export controls include a provision whereby anyone using rare earths to develop advanced semiconductor, defined as 14 nanometer and below, will require case-by-case approval, which effectively gives China de facto veto power over the entire advanced semiconductor supply chain, as rare earths are used at critical steps throughout, from ASML, who use rare earths for magnets in their lithography machines, to TSMC. The export controls are also extraterritorial. Foreign entities must obtain Chinese export licenses before re-exporting products manufactured abroad if they contain Chinese rare earth materials comprising 0.1% or more of the product's value. So China is effectively mirroring the U.S. semiconductor export controls that were used against them, with its own comprehensive extraterritorial control regime, except with rare earths. Okay, why does it matter? Because these semiconductors are necessary for AI. Right? And if China is going to enforce this, China is going to leverage this, then they could essentially halt AI development in or usage here in North America, in the United States. That could be pretty substantial. Now, there is a school of thought here that thinks that China is doing this preemptively because Trump is going to be headed over to negotiate with President Xi, and that they need some leverage. And that makes sense because, as it's been stated elsewhere, if China does do this and they do leverage this, this hurts them as well, because it's a global phenomenon, and they'd have to basically put restrictions on all countries, which will make them persona non grata and also hurt their own AI development. So it's pretty interesting that this is happening. We're not seeing it reflected directly inside of the AI stock price, so it's not like a big deal yet. But you can imagine that if it is a screw that needs to be turned, depending on how the negotiations happen between Trump and Z, who knows what we might see in the stock prices. Moving on to another Besant piece here. He is on CNBC. Sorry, he is on CNBC. He is on CNBC talking about reversing Dodd-Frank. Let's see what he has to say.
Comments from the Treasury Secretary regarding the banking sector. For that, let's get to Steve Leisman, who's been following it. Morning, Steve.
Hey, Sarah. Yeah, this Treasury Secretary doesn't mince words. Scott Bessent making some sharply critical remarks about the 2010 Dodd-Frank Banking Reform Act and promising sweeping deregulation to help stem the decline in community banking.
The post-crisis framework has left a trail of destruction in its wake by reinforcing the larger economic dynamics that have hollowed out the American heartland while enriching the money centers in coastal cities. To be clear, the financial crisis underscored the need for new regulations. The purpose of Dodd-Frank was to end too big to fail, but it ended up creating too small to succeed.
Comments from the Treasury Secretary regarding the banking sector. For that, let's get to Steve Leisman, who's been following it. Morning, Steve.
Hey, Sarah. Yeah, this Treasury Secretary doesn't mince words. Scott Bessent making some sharply critical remarks about the 2010 Dodd-Frank Banking Reform Act and promising sweeping deregulation to help stem the decline in community banking.
The post-crisis.
So this idea here of community banking. If you guys saw the interview with Richard Werner on Tucker, or any Richard Werner interview of length, talks about the correlation between the number of small banks, especially community banks, and the freedom and prosperity, the innovation and development of a nation. And that as banks get consolidated and get merged together and conglomerated into a whole, there's less and less freedom, less and less innovation that happens. And you can understand why. If you need a small loan, you need, $12,000 in order to finance a local business. That's not something that a big bank might care about. Might be hard for you to get any face time in order to get a loan like that. Whereas a community bank who's serving that community, has people from that community, it can make sense that they want to go ahead and do that. But with Dodd-Frank, that's a response to the global financial crisis. There's so much more rules and restrictions and regulations and requirements put on banks that if you were too small, sometimes it didn't make sense for you to be in business. Maybe you couldn't even give out the loans that you wanted to give out. And so at least here, Bessent is making the claim that they want to roll that back so that you can actually have smaller banks that pop up. This sounds like good news to me, and it could help Main Street. How that reflects in the charts, I'm not entirely sure. It might be one of those things that it's good for the economy, bad for markets. But it is pretty interesting that if they do what they're saying, more people will be able to start businesses on a local level. And then finally, this post here from Jeffrey P. Snyder from Eurodollar University talks about the New Zealand central bank who cut 50 basis points. So he starts off here: a major central bank panicked into a 50 basis point rate cut this week, completely unplanned, yet perfectly predictable to those paying attention. And the scary part, they've already admitted they're willing to go even further. This isn't an isolated move. It's the beginning of a global chain reaction that markets have been quietly forecasting for months. Once the first can of Pringles pops, every central banker follows, because rate cuts don't fix weaknesses, they expose it. While the media calls it support, what's really happening is capitulation. Jobs, growth, currencies, everything is starting to bend under the same pressure that always ends in recession. Eurodollar University is a great resource in order to learn more about these things, especially how these different interest rates and currency flows and Eurodollar system works, and how policy gets synchronized in order to react to some of these things that are happening within the economy and within the stresses of the financial system. So they're going to have Eurodollar University is going to have a an event on Tuesday, October 14th, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where they're going to be talking about that under the Eurodollar University webinar. I definitely recommend it. But you can rest assured that the rate cut cycle is going to be full steam ahead, and we might very well see larger rate cuts happen in the future. And as other central banks cut rates more drastically than the Fed, they're going to have to go ahead and catch up, because it could cause a differential within the currency. And we're already seeing it now. The dollar is starting to rise versus other currencies, which is not something that the United States would want long term. The whole point of cutting rates and easing is to release funds. We want people to be selling the dollar and buying assets. So as the world cuts, so the Fed will cut too. All right, that's it for the Daily Bread for today. Join us again, looks like next Monday, for a recap of what happens Friday and over the weekend. Thank you very much for watching. We'll talk to you next time.